Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Muriel Bowser. I'm joined by members of my public safety team and DC residents. We are located in the heart of Ward 4. I especially want to acknowledge the Deputy Mayor for Public Safety and Justice, Deputy Mayor Lindsay Appiah, and the Acting Police Chief, Pamela Smith. You've heard me brief and speak many times on public safety and how ensuring the safety of our city is our first priority in working hand in hand with policymakers and community to ensure that we are doing everything possible to make our community safe. And to that end, today I'm announcing new legislation that will address recent crime trends and give law enforcement more tools to hold criminals accountable and keep our neighborhoods safe. The Addressing Crime Trends Now Act will create an environment that better supports communities and victims, as well as MPD's ability to hire and retain qualified officers. And some of the changes are just plain common sense. We know, for example, that the criminal behavior directed at our business community, particularly our retailers, is unacceptable. And people in our city are sick and tired of it. People want great businesses in their neighborhoods. They want to go to stores and restaurants, and they don't want to have to worry about those businesses being robbed repeatedly and brazenly.
Yes.
So with this legislation, we are creating criminal penalties and establishing a new crime directed towards organized retail theft in our city. And under the new law, it will be illegal for any person to organize a theft-for-profit scheme by recruiting or directing other individuals to commit organized retail theft. We are also reinstating the law that makes it unlawful to wear a mask for the purpose of committing criminal acts or threatening people or causing fear.
Thank you.
Obviously, our community's relationship around wearing masks has changed significantly since 2020, and thank God for that. But we've all seen the videos. In fact, there was one from the wharf last Monday where everyone who jumped out of a car with a gun pointed at an innocent person had on a ski mask. And we need to address that. These changes, of course, won't apply to people who are wearing masks for their health. And one thing that you've heard from Chief Smith and her team frequently out in the community, they're out over the last several months and visited favorite neighborhoods across our city, and there has been overwhelming support for addressing open-air drug dealing and loitering. People in the community are not fools. They know what's happening at some of these sites. And the new legislation will allow MPD to limit loitering by reinstating the ability for the police chief to declare a drug-free zone for up to 120 hours to disrupt and prohibit people from congregating on public space for the purchase, sale, or use of illegal drugs. The establishment of a temporary drug-free zone will allow MPD and community members to work together to interrupt illegal activity and allow neighborhoods to reclaim our space. And finally, Chief Smith will go over the next part in more detail, but I want to start by saying this. MPD continues to be a leader in fair and constitutional policing across this nation. They continue to work every day to have and keep the trust of our city, and this legislation won't change that. It will, however, support the department in dealing with some of the negative consequences of the Comprehensive Police and Justice Amendment Act. Some of the changes that were made just don't match the daily practice of safe and effective policing. And whether that's around incidental contact you can make with a person, or how officers can use their body-worn camera footage to write reports, or whether police are allowed to safely chase a criminal who's right in front of them. And you've heard me say repeatedly this year, we must have a policy environment that supports accountability, whether it's from school safety leaders, advisory neighborhood commissioners, or in conversations with residents. And residents have expressed loud and clear to me in every venue you can imagine across this city that they are looking for solutions to help fill the gaps in our public safety ecosystem. We promise to leave no stone unturned, but we need to act now. And we need to send the strong message that violence is not acceptable in our city. And this perception that people have that you can commit a brazen crime and get away with it has got to stop. This legislation will help change that. And I want to thank our officers. We should give a hand to the hardworking men and women of the Metropolitan Police Department. We want to give a hand to the leadership. We want to recognize our 911 call takers who are taking your calls and helping to get police on the way. We want to thank our fire and emergency management officials. We want to recognize the prosecutors and the public defenders who help make our system work. We want to acknowledge and thank the judges, but we also want them to see us and hear us and let them know we want to be safe. And so, as I mentioned, there's a lot of work to do. There's not one tool that is the magic wand, but we have to investigate and press down on all of our tools and make sure we're doing everything that we can. From the enforcement side, which is what we're here to talk about today, but we talk every day also about the prevention side and the opportunity side. And you should be proud in your city that we give people 1 chance, 2 chances, 3 chances. But your chances can affect my safety. And that's what we're here to talk about. We want everybody to take advantage of the opportunities available in our great city. And we want to be safe. So with that, I want to acknowledge our Deputy Mayor for Public Safety and Justice, Deputy Mayor Lindsay Appiah, followed by Chief Pamela Smith, currently the acting chief. And we need to get our chief confirmed, right? Yeah. Let's get our chief confirmed. And then we'll have some time for questions. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm Lindsay Appiah. I'm privileged to serve as the Deputy Mayor for Public Safety and Justice for the district. Our public safety and justice ecosystem, it's unique because of the district's criminal justice system structure, one that's a mix of local, federal, and independent agencies, most of which are not under the authority of the mayor. And so what we need from all of our colleagues across our local and federal and independent is for them to match the commitment that we have in district government to not just combating crime, but to our approach to the work with the belief that we can prevent the next crime, that we can prevent someone else from being a victim. From Mayor Bowser to every dedicated employee in district government, we are simply committed to working with our community and government partners every day to make the city safer. Mayor Bowser is putting every necessary resource towards public safety and turning these trends around. The mayor has maintained, and you heard her say today, we must have a policy environment that supports appropriate accountability. And her Addressing Crime Trends Now Act demonstrates what our community, you all, are telling us. We want appropriate accountability for those who choose to commit crime and inflict fear in our neighborhoods. In the district, we're leaders in systemic reform. That is certainly true in criminal justice space, where we lead in pushing the bounds of what is possible to achieve equal justice for all under the law. We can and we should be proud of our progress, but we must never be so proud that we're unwilling to critically evaluate our reforms and adjust when unintended consequences are leading to harmful outcomes for those we serve. While we're a city that often leads the nation in instituting forward-thinking reforms, we must never lose sight that we are first and foremost a local city, and that our solutions must be tailored to the specific realities that we're facing here. ACT now clarifies and updates several existing policies to better align with the day-to-day realities of safe and effective policing. And so I'm going to now turn it over to Chief Smith to talk more about some of those proposals.
Hello, everyone, and I'm Acting Chief Pamela Smith of the Metropolitan Police Department here in Washington, D.C., and thank you for joining us today. I would like to begin by thanking Mayor Muriel Bowser and Deputy Mayor Lindsay Appiah for introducing this legislation. I'm honored to stand here today to speak with you about legislation that will help how we, as the Metropolitan Police Department, better serve our communities. This legislation is impactful because it clarifies the many challenges our law enforcement professionals face today. While all of these provisions are highly important, there are 6 key provisions listed in the bill that I would like to expand on just a little bit. It will be our vehicle pursuit policy, reestablishing drug-free zones, which will help limit loitering, new legislation for organized retail theft, clarifying language regarding incidental contact with the neck, and modifications of officer discipline, and ensuring that our officers can review the body-worn camera prior to writing their initial report. Allow me to speak about these in greater detail. Vehicle pursuits. When the Comprehensive Policing and Justice Amendment Act went into effect in April of 2023, MPD immediately began to experience the effects of the legislation, which banned pursuits in all cases. Working with the mayor's office and the council, this summer an emergency clarification amendment was passed, which clarified some cases where pursuits could occur. This legislation includes those clarifications. Make no mistake, the Metropolitan Police Department recognizes the potential harms of vehicle pursuits, but our officers must have the limited ability to pursue in the most violent cases to ensure that we keep our communities safe. Anti-loitering, drug-free zones. Residents, let me say this again, and I've been out in many communities, residents have very real complaints about drug transactions that they are witnessing in public space. This legislation will return a practice that has been determined to be constitutional by reestablishing drug-free zones. This serves as another tool for our Metropolitan Police Department to address drug-related crime on our district streets and protect the public from the dangers that are often reasonable and associated with sales, purchase, and the use of illegal drugs. Organized retail theft. We continue to hear from our business community that organized retail theft is a problem which can impact revenue, but also impacts our job communities. And this legislation gives the Metropolitan Police Department the ability to address organized retail theft. Specifically, this legislation gives officers another tool to hold folks accountable who make concerted effort to thieve for profit and or directing others to do so. We uphold, and I want to be clear about this, we uphold the district's values, and we underscore that this type of behavior is not tolerated here in the district. Similar to clarifications necessary on vehicle pursuits, this legislation seeks clarification language related to neck restraints and asphyxiating restraints, specifically clarifying incidental contact versus an actual neck restraint. MPD has long restricted neck restraints that would cause an individual's inability to breathe. These policy restrictions go back decades, and I fully support these restrictions. The provisions in this legislation, the provisions in the recently constructed legislation, the Comprehensive Policing and Justice Amendment Act, are overly broad and jeopardizes our public safety. As we have experienced since the effect of the amendment, this spring, the combination of the words intent or effect with the assertion of the word movement has created numerous situations where officers were engaged with armed individuals, individuals attempting self-harm or similar, and due to incidental contact and volatile situations were in violation of our current policy as written. While codifying the restrictions may have been well intended, they have the unintended consequences of potentially escalating the severity of the force that is used. And it creates situations where our officers are kind of hesitant to go hands-on to apprehend an individual when it is appropriate. It has created circumstances where officers' credibility has been called into question due to incidental contact. I want to be clear. The Metropolitan Police Department has and will continue to prohibit what we think the public thinks of as a neck restraint. But this legislation clarifies language to address concerns of incidental contact by our officer. This legislation maintains the restrictions that are necessary to potentially harm the public. We're also talking about the modifications to officer discipline to maintain transparency, but also allows for privacy rights to be protected. This legislation introduces well-needed revisions to our officer discipline standards to ensure the officers, number one, continue to be held accountable and provide public transparency around discipline, but it also provides them privacy protection that is afforded to every other government DC employee. And finally, the body-worn camera review prior to writing reports. This legislation aligns our body-worn camera policies with nationwide best practices and recommendations from the U.S. Department of Justice and the United States Office of Attorney here in the District of Columbia. Currently, due to the restriction in current law, an officer is not able to review their body-worn camera prior to making an initial report. While this makes sense in cases involving a police officer involved shooting or serious use of force, for most calls police officers respond to, the body-worn camera is an important tool to document what was observed and what occurred. And we need our officers to be able to utilize this tool to the fullest extent. This new legislation allows our officers the ability to provide the most accurate police reports possible. And being able to view their camera footage to recall relevant details from the scene is important, not only for our department, but it's also important for the United States Attorney's Office when they are prosecuting cases. This recommendation is also supported by our United States Attorney's Office and mirrors national best practices recommendations. I want to again thank Mayor Bowser for her continued support of public safety here in the District of Columbia and her tireless effort and work to submit to Council legislation that will help the Metropolitan Police Department to better serve the communities that you live in and the communities that we live in. Thank you.
Okay, I want to ask the Chief and Deputy Mayor and City Administrator Donahue to join me. We'll take some press questions, and may have time for community questions. Yes, please introduce yourself as you speak.
I'm Janae Dill with Axios. Madam Mayor, it's probably been a very long time since DC leaders talked about open-air drug markets so specifically. Can someone talk about how many you suspect there are in DC, what's exactly being sold illegally now, and what areas might be targeted if this were to become law?
Let me ask the Chief to respond.
And so, as most of you know, we have been conducting multi-agency initiatives across the District of Columbia. And in that process, we have a 3-day approach where there are certain areas across the district based off of data where we recognize that, and then our community members have also shared with us that there's significant drug transaction. On day 1, we will go out and we will determine, we send our criminal investigators, our detectives out in those areas to really take a good look at the types of drugs that are in those areas. We make effective arrests. Day 2, we come back and we bring in an all DC government approach to really take a look at those areas. And then what we'll do is day 3, we do what's called a celebration. I'm sure some of you have participated in those areas. So there are quite a few areas across the District of Columbia where we intentionally will focus on, where we recognize that there's open air drug markets specifically related on the data that we currently have. I don't want to forecast where we will go, because we have to create plans to make sure that we not only keep the community safe, but also keep our officers safe.
Next question. And as I come up, I should acknowledge that we've been joined by Councilmember Kenyon McDuffie at large. Thank you, Councilmember Anita Bonds at large, and Ward 4 Member Louis George. Next question. Yes.
Good afternoon, Mayor. Can you talk about your reversal on opposing drug-free markets some years ago to now, and why the change of heart here?
My what? My what?
You repealed the drug-free zones in 2014. Why now? Why bring this back in this legislation?
Thank you for that question. Because as I recall, I think that was the year that my last year on the council, and a measure moved from Councilmember Grasso that joined prostitution-free zones and drug-free zones, if my memory serves me correct. And that bill I supported that bill. And the question that was previously asked is accurate. We see, and part of the reason why you hear that we call this bill addressing crime trends now, is that we want to blunt a trend that we see in more open air drug dealing. That we have pretty much squelched in the city, save for, I would say, a handful, but certainly less than 10. And we don't want that activity to proliferate. This law, the drug-free zones was in place. How long did you tell me, Deputy Mayor? From 1996 to 2014 in the district, and we think that we want the police to have the tool. I want to kind of set some expectations that the police chief will deploy and use the tool using the officers that are available to us, and she will prioritize it for the best interests of public safety. So no one should think that there will be 20 drug-free zones being implemented at the same time, but this is a tool that the chief would have. I press questions first. Yes. Yes. Yes.
What part of Act Now do you think best will address gun violence?
All of Act Now and all of Safer Stronger. So as you know, we introduced a bill the late spring, early summer that included many provisions that we think will make the city safer, including addressing gun crime and gun penalties. And so all of that is important. But the things that we're introducing today address the 6 pillars that the chief mentioned that are going to help us address emerging trends in retail death and open air drug dealing, but also reinstating the prohibition on ski masks. Yes, Mark.
Can you tell us, under the new legislation, when would it be permissible for an officer to engage in a vehicular pursuit, and whose decision? Would it be the officer's decision, or would they need to get permission from a commander before engaging? And I have a follow-up to that.
Okay. So when it comes to vehicle pursuits, it must, the threshold for that is that the officer must be able to witness that there is an imminent threat to public safety. He or she can use their own discretion in determining what that is. However, we do have very, very strict policy that dictates when, where, looking at the factors, whether there are large crowds, when we pursue vehicles, and keeping in mind it has to be an imminent threat of criminal activity that is afoot, and being able to apprehend those suspects within a reasonable amount of time. And I say reasonable amount of time because we want to take into consideration the elements that are around a particular situation, making sure we're not in a school zone and places like that, to ensure that the public stays safe. That is the officer's discretion, as I stated, however, with close supervision from the supervisor.
We saw the video recently of a vehicle that struck a family in a crosswalk. There was a police officer just seconds after that rolled on the scene, initiated what looked like he was going to go after the car, then came back and said he wasn't allowed to pursue. In that instance, would that officer, if this legislation was in place, would that officer have been allowed to pursue that vehicle and likely apprehend that person?
As much as I would like to answer that question, I can't speak to it because I don't know exactly what you're talking about. I think we do have, in the legislation that was passed this summer within the emergency bill, gives officers a little latitude to be able to pursue vehicles when there's an imminent threat. And again, I can't answer that particular question. Yes, sir.
On the restraint, the neck restraint, you were kind enough to give us what I thought was a very helpful demonstration of what would not be allowed as far as a chokehold and what would be allowed as far as a neck, putting restraint on somebody or pressure on somebody's neck. Could you give us that demonstration again for the public right now?
Well, I wouldn't be able to do it right now. We can certainly do it off camera.
So that the
We will certainly be able to do it off camera. Oh, I'm sorry. Do it off camera. And we can also direct you to the link on our website where our community briefings are, that we publish those use of force specifically related to neck restraints and other use of force on our website.
You won't give us the same demonstration on camera that you gave us?
I will not give, when I gave it to you, it was off camera. And I would defer to, certainly willing to demonstrate, but not on camera.
Mark, we have actual examples. So we don't have to make up an example here because we have actual examples. And we put them up in our community briefing so you can see exactly what the police are dealing with and talking about. Yes.
Could you just bring us up to date on the hiring and retiring of police officers right now? Getting any better, worse, steady? Chief Smith?
Yep. Good morning. Thank you for that question. So I say that we're getting better when it comes to hiring. I've been in this seat since July 17, 2021. In August, 2023. Whew, did I go back? My bad. Yeah. So we've had 21 officers, recruit officers in our August class. Our September class, we had 21. And today, I'm happy to announce, this morning at 7 a.m., we have 23 new officers that have been recruited for the Metropolitan Police Department. I have also established a recruitment team, a very diverse recruitment team that will focus specifically on recruiting officers for the Metropolitan Police Department.
Okay, any press of Adelia?
First question for the chief. I have two questions. I know you spoke to parents at the parenting workshop at the Arc this Sunday in Ward 8. A lot of folks are saying curbing this crime crisis involving our young people starts at home.
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to know what you shared with those parents, if you talked to them about holding their children accountable, specifically when we're talking about criminalizing or changing the laws and pertaining to wearing masks and some other behaviors. And then I have a second question.
Well, thank you for that question. And I tell you, yesterday, the Parenting Revival, it was hosted by Ronald Moulton, was a very, very good revival. I think we had up to 100, to include children, males and females, parents alike in that setting. And the intent was really to help some of those parents find solutions for how they need to address their children. Some of them have exhausted themselves of every single tool that they have. And the Metropolitan Police Department, and I specifically, the Chief of Police, want to be a part of helping them resolve some of their issues. And I've shared with them yesterday my upbringing, where there were days where, you know, I didn't know where my next meal was going to come from as a child, right? I talked to them about some of the disparities that my mother had when it came to resources of being able to raise 3 children at a very young age. And so knowing that these women and these men are still struggling with some of those same issues, I want to specifically be able to share with them that there are resources available to them here within the District of Columbia. The second piece was that we recognize that some of our parents are dealing with mental health issues. You know, being able to connect with DBH to ensure that this is not just a one-time meeting. This is going to be an ongoing meeting, and we will continue to have. And it's my understanding from Mr. Moulton is that we will take this across the District of Columbia, because it does start at home. And again, I'll preface that, as I said before, that that parents are exhausted with ideas. I had one young lady who cried about the fact that she pleaded with the system to keep her son, not necessarily behind bars, but to get him some resources because he was just really out of control and she had no other measures in place. We have at the Metropolitan Police Department our Youth and Family Engagement Bureau, where we work with at-risk kids on a regular basis and their families. And I would encourage you, if you haven't had the opportunity to meet Assistant Chief Wright, please reach out to him and we will do whatever we can along with some of our other DC government entities to support our parents in this space.
Okay. Second question was just about the body-worn cameras and some of the other policy changes you have planned. You said the U.S. Attorney supports those changes as well. Did you get guidance from the U.S. Attorney in regards to what changes could be made to make sure cases are prosecuted?
Absolutely. And one of the things that I will say, since I've been in this space with Matt Graves, he and I have met, if not bi-weekly, monthly, to really talk about making sure that when we write our reports that they can prosecute. And one of the hindrance in that is not being able to articulate or remember, right? What actually occurred. And it's not necessarily the actual entire incident. It may just be a color of a car, right? Our officers come to work every day and they have calls waiting for them when they get to their districts. And that's a lot of information for them to remember. Having them, giving them the opportunity, and this legislation will do that, to review their body-worn cameras prior to writing their final police report will certainly help and aid in prosecution of cases.
Yes,
Do you have 7 votes on the council for the legislation?
we will. Yep. But let's start today. Let's start today. Hold up. No. You asked me a lot of questions. Let's start today. You asked me, do I have 7 votes? Let's start today. You got any other questions? Yes, go ahead, Janae.
Well, go ahead.
Go. I'm sorry.
So as far as the constitutionality, there
Yep.
were questions about that among the council. People who I spoke to on background said that a former AG said that there's a gray area as far as anti-loitering laws and constitutionality. What do you say to that?
What I say is that this law was in place in the district from 1996 to 2014. I'll ask Deputy Mayor Pia to say more.
Sure. We know that I'm a lawyer, right? So there's no benefit in us proposing anything that isn't real or unconstitutional. So certainly we've looked at that. I myself looking that there are drug-free zones. The Sentencing Project actually has a really interesting primer on drug-free zones across the country. And certainly I look back at the time of the 2014, when the council struck down the 2 together. And were there any challenges specifically to the anti-loitering drug-free zone? No, there aren't any that I'm aware of. There certainly were issues around prostitution-free zones, but constitutionality, whether it's in policing or any of the proposals we're making, is at the foundation of anything that we're going to put forth, and certainly a primary consideration for this lawyer.
Last follow-up question. So, legislation to implementation. How do we, in terms of that, with the gray area, whose interpretation is it up to that something's constitutional? Because by the end of the day, people have certain biases. And, when it comes to particular cases, it might change based on who you talk to. And, we've seen that time and time again. So what are the safeguards against that, against certain laws being abused, even if it is for safety's sake?
I mean, I can't speak generally across the board about constitutionality, but with regards to this provision, when you look at it, there are a number of considerations that go into the determination of how an area would be designated, the type of notice that those in the area are given, or otherwise of what is allowed or not allowed. And so I think those are the type of determinations that officers make on a regular basis, and that we work with attorneys, legal counsel division, and otherwise to help us to make sure that we're clear about what is and isn't constitutional policing, and certainly constitutional laws.
Okay, you've been waiting. Yep.
Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Chief, Tom Rousey, ABC 7 News. 2 questions. One, just kind of getting into the details deep in the legislation. It seems like there are some provisions that make it more difficult to get information, at least about officers accused of violations. So I wanted to ask about the thought process and what problem you're addressing there, and if there's concerns that it might keep the public from getting information the public should know. And also on the masking part, I just wanted to ask, since people would still be allowed to do it for health reasons, how does that work on the street? Like, would it just be an extra charge after the fact, or would it be more than that?
Let me ask the deputy mayor to speak to it.
Sure. So, I'm sorry, on the first part, one of the things is we're committed to transparency, and we recognize that there is a higher level of accountability and expectation for officers, which is why the proposal that we've put forth is that for substantiated allegations of misconduct, that information be made available to the public, which is something that we don't do for any other district employee, right? You cannot get information about individual employee discipline. But we recognize there is a higher standard for officers. But we also recognize that there's a balance between a need for transparency and appropriate accountability for officers and some privacy rights. Officers have entitlement to due process and otherwise as well. So if they have allegations that are not substantiated, we believe there are some balances, and that allowing them to have privacy in those instances is still appropriate. And then, I'm sorry, the other part on masking in process, this was the law until 2020, and so certainly it is not just that, you know, the MPD will stop people for wearing a mask. It's a mask right? So someone who is wearing a mask for the purposes of engaging in a violation of a criminal or civil penalty to threaten, harass, or to cause fear, those are the type of, based upon the totality of circumstances, those are the type of determinations that MPD officers have to make a lot of time when determining how to prevent crime. And so what we're giving them now is a tool. I use this example because it's a real one. We have a nightlife task force that I met with the business owners in U Street corridor who were asking us, listen, people are coming in with ski masks on in July. You can't do anything about that. And the answer was no. That MPD, they are committed to constitutionality. They can only enforce the law as it is. If there's no law, there's nothing for them to enforce. And so this isn't about getting people on an extra charge for wearing a mask. It's about preventing crime. Right? That's really what it's about. And so giving our officers the opportunity to prevent crime before it happens based upon their evaluation of a threat.
Are they arrested? Are they apprehended? Does the mask come off? Do they have a conversation? Is that a crime to have a mask walking into a store in July?
So in and of itself, Delia, no, it's not a crime to walk into a store with a mask on in July. But based upon an evaluation by MPD, you often see in our lookouts or otherwise 4 people in ski masks walking up sidewalk or otherwise. This gives MPD the opportunity to even engage. If an officer saw someone approaching walking up the sidewalk now in July with a ski mask, they have no tool to engage, even if they believe that is, based upon the totality of circumstance, a concern. So I can't say, right, like in random examples, the chief would be better, or but really it's about, okay, we want to give them the opportunity to at least break up. That's even what we're talking about with drug-free zones or otherwise. We want to interrupt the potential for criminal activity. That's the goal.
I want to talk about strategy. What is your strategy for getting to 7 votes on the council?
This is my strategy on any legislative piece that I introduce to the council. I ask the professionals and the experts what they need, be it in fire and EMS or MPD or the Department of Human Services. And I introduce the legislation that I think will help close the gaps. In this case, the legislation that will help keep us safer. And then I work with the members of the council to get the legislation passed. Frequently, people tell me it won't pass. You have 0 votes. And I just keep working hard every day to say to members of this community, for example, in Ward 4, who talk to me daily about their concerns about safety. They ask me frequently about wanting more police officers. And what I tell them is I can't do it alone. We have to have a policy environment that supports safe communities. We have to have a policy environment that allows us to recruit and retain officers and not lose our officers to the surrounding jurisdictions because our policy environment makes them scared to do their job.
Chairman Mendelson's office wasn't briefed beforehand? Was Brooke Pinto's office, for example?
Brooke
Judiciary
Pinto
Chair?
herself was briefed, and she's the chair of the committee. And so that is frequently our process. We talk to the chair of the committee upon introduction. We shared the legislation. You know, my side, the mayor's side, is required to get a legal sufficiency. So we also submitted it to the Attorney General. And I'd like to have this introduction to the council by their November meeting.
Going back on a follow-up, I didn't get quite an answer on this. I mean, what is the drugs that you all suspect are being sold in these open-air drug markets? I think it's worth the public sort of getting, you know, an understanding of that.
Sure.
It's opioids, fentanyl, controlled substance drugs that are illegal in the District of Columbia.
On Kennedy Street, for instance,
Is that
prosecutors
illegal?
said, well, it's not illegal, but on Kennedy Street, prosecutors charged the Kennedy crew of bringing marijuana from California, for instance, and selling it on the street. Is marijuana, the sale of it illegally, a concern?
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Is that a big concern among these markets?
Well, it's a concern because you cannot sell marijuana and you cannot illegally sell it. You can't use it, sell it, or possess it. So, in the spaces that we're in right now, and to your question, it is illegal, and we would effect an arrest in that case.
A legal amount of marijuana in a drug-free zone?
Well, an illegal amount, not a legal amount, illegal
ounces.
amount.
So would you be able to possess 2 ounces of marijuana in a drug-free zone?
You don't know the answer to that? Come on, guys. No, it's illegal.
If it's been declared a drug-free zone, then you're not going to be loitering in it or possessing or using marijuana. But I just want to get back to Janae's question, and maybe I'm reading a little too much in it, because we support the initiative 71 that the people of the district passed, but it also created very dangerous gray markets in the district, which is why I also introduced legislation to allow the district to tax and regulate marijuana. The marijuana now Chief didn't say this, I'll be a little bit more colorful, it's a lot of cash in it, it's still a lot of street sales, and it's a lot of violence involved in it. So whether it's marijuana or fentanyl or pills or Percocets or whatever, these drugs are fueling violence and they're disrupting peaceful communities. Okay, I'm going to wrap up my press questions. Are you a member of the press?
Yeah,
Okay.
Washington Times.
Okay.
Yeah, there was talk of unintended consequences from the past police reforms.
Yep.
I was just wondering why there was a blind spot to those potential consequences at the time they were passed.
I don't think there was. Certainly not from us, not from our previous police chiefs. I have noted concerns throughout. There was an emergency passed, and I think, and let me just say this, I think that the intentions, they were well-intentioned. And I think all of us following the murder of George Floyd wanted to make sure that we were doing everything possible to have a safe and constitutional police force. I said at the time, our police force is not like a lot of police forces around the country, and I think some of the reforms, have made our communities less safe. So there's not to say that there weren't good pieces of that legislation, but we are addressing some things that we think are very important. All right. Any other press questions? All right. Press question? Yes.
Beatrice Peterson at ABC News. You talked a little bit about the wharf situation, the armed robbery that happened earlier this month. I'm just curious from you, do you see that as possibly the breaking point for the creation of the new masking law? And about the masking law, do you consider that to be maybe a misdemeanor or a felony or a citation?
The incident that you're referring to really has nothing to do with the introduction. We've been working on it for a few weeks with this more comprehensive piece. Let me ask the deputy mayor to talk about the specific charge.
Again, so this is more, I have to look if it's, I don't believe we've made it a felony. It's linked to a mask plus. So if someone's engaging in criminal conduct or has intent to threaten, harm, or harass, certainly that will be charged as well. But again, I sort of point to this because, this isn't about criminalizing behavior so much as changing behavior, right? Like, so our goal is to interrupt criminal activity, and if people are engaged in other criminal conduct, that will be charged. But the charging decisions are MPD's and certainly the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Okay, last Michael.
Yeah, hi, Michael from the Washington Post here. Are the members of the council still here? I'm wondering if we might be able to hear from them about the proposal, what they've heard.
What's your question? Did they leave? Oh, they're here. Yeah, what's your question, Michael?
Yeah, I want to know what they think of the proposal, if they support what's being discussed. Obviously, what they passed in 2020, 2022 was criticized, so I guess responding to everything that's being said.
Sure. Councilmember McDuffie?
Thank you, Mayor Bowser. So, Michael, I think that was your question. I'm not sure where you are. So, I don't want to speak for my colleagues, but I have not seen the proposal. I don't think any of us have yet to review the proposal. I think it deserves an expeditious review to determine what the council can agree on to be able to promote, because ultimately I'm here, and I think my colleagues are here, because the violence that we're seeing right now, the crime is rampant and it's unacceptable. And so we came as a show of support for residents who have felt like they need to see their city, their mayor, their council members, and other elected officials really engage in action to promote safety across the District of Columbia. So the minute I have an opportunity to review the mayor's proposal, I'll be happy to go on record with you about what I agree with and what I don't. But ultimately, this today for me was about really showing a sense of solidarity that I do not accept the levels of crime that we're seeing, and the solutions need to come in a myriad of forms. And if there are things that we can work with the mayor on, then you should know that we're going to work with her to make sure that we get that done.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with my colleague. It is so important for us in this city to make sure, as Democrats, as a Democrat-led city, the Republicans in Congress are attacking us every day in our very democracy. And as a Democratic-led city, we have to stand together united. And so, as my colleague said, we are standing here together united. We're also saying to our community members that we are going to work together. It can't be the council versus the mayor versus the judges versus USAO versus AOAG. It has to be all of us united together, working together. That's the environment we have to be in, and that's the environment that we all are committed to doing. Thank you.
I'd just like to add a word about what we are seeing today, all of us together. It is about being solid and together, unified in fighting this, what was called many years ago, this scourge that is on our city, our communities. And that's why we're here. It's not about whether or not a provision may have a little twist in the law. We know that we're at a point where we have got to get help. And help is not going to come from the land. It's going to come from us. And so together, I think we are saying today, all of us, that we're standing together against what is happening in our community, to our children, to our families. And I want to thank the mayor and the administration for being bold, because that's what this is, being very bold. Thank you. And we're here because this is our town. That's right. And we have to make it work, and that's what we're committed to doing. I don't know if we have 7 votes, but we probably will. Thank you, Mayor.
I appreciate all three of you. We can start with Councilmember Lewis George. I appreciate that you're all here and you want to do something about crime. But from what you've heard this morning, whether it be about the use of force changes, the release of data. Is there anything that you see or have heard today that is either something that you know definitely you can get behind or that you know is definitely a deal breaker for you?
Mark, I appreciate your question, and I sincerely do. Without having seen the proposal and read specific language, there's no way to be able to comment on what I'm going to vote for and what I'm not. What I will say is that I can agree with the mayor and anybody, for that matter, who is putting forth policies designed to make our city safer. I'm willing to work with them, right? And so I'm here today because I'm showing that I'm willing to work with the mayor. I'm willing to work with these ANC commissioners, our civic association leadership, with my colleagues on proposals that we can agree on that are designed to keep our city safer. If it is fair and constitutional policing, then it should be on the table in terms of what we are looking at to make our city safer. We need to enhance the level of safety that is in our communities today, and I think most of us can agree on that.
All right. You heard it. And we're not going for 7. We're going for 13. Okay? Thank you, everybody.